Hi, this is Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at DevOps.com, DevOps TV, and I'm here on day 2 of the DevOps Enterprise Summit 2018 here in lovely Las Vegas. And I've been having some really great conversations over the last few days. And this next conversation I think is going to be really, really fascinating on a number of different levels. We have, to my immediate left, Christophe de Boeck, who is, let's see if I can get this right, the Technical Delivery Manager, Core and Lending at Kiwibank. Right?
Not anymore, actually.
Not anymore.
No.
Okay.
That was when I started to write the presentation that I submitted.
Okay.
But in the meantime, I've joined the testing team at Kiwibank.
Okay, great. So you're still with Kiwibank.
Yes, I am.
Okay, awesome. And then we also have Steve Mayner, who is the is it SAFE, FE Fellow and Principal Consultant at Scale Agile. Thanks, guys, for joining me today. Appreciate it. So one of the general themes that I keep hearing over and over again is the issue of culture in organizations' adoption of DevOps, and how leadership really needs to get on board to really advance the whole concept of DevOps. So, what are some of the things that you guys have seen within your organizations regarding that transformational journey, and how leadership can kind of take a leadership role in doing that?
I think it's interesting that we see a lot of reaction against managers pointing at their teams and tell them that they have to be agile or have to be DevOps. So there is a reaction to that. But I think we often forget that leaders also need help, that they also need a lot of advice, because not many leaders know what is happening to them. They've gotten to a position in a certain way, and DevOps approaches are really shocking their world as well. And we often forget what effect that has on them. So that's something that I think needs more attention.
Okay. Yeah. In fact, one of the things that I think I mentioned in last year's presentation is leaders that are often most directly involved in the transformation are kind of caught in the middle, right? They have the least amount of control of the change. Somebody else has decided we're going to do this, and yet they have the most to lose, because what if I'm not successful in this new way of working? Will I still, will I still be here? Will I still have a job? Will I be able to be okay in this new world? So, whether it's that dimension, changing the culture, this is at the root. It is how we as humans change. And what I learned in my learning journey that Gene and I started talking about years ago, as I was going through my research that wound up to being the presentations the last few years, is that we all have this instinctive reaction to change, right? It goes back to Maslow's hierarchy, right? The more it threatens our safety and security, we have very visceral reactions. And the interesting part of the research was that how leaders actually lead, how they behave, how the competencies of how they talk about the change, how they get people involved in the change, how they invest in preparing people to make sure that they understand the what and the why and the how, and have a conversation rather than you're going to do it kind of communication. All of these different things, the research actually shows has a direct correlation to how people receive the change and how they respond, right? Rather than fearing it being something that they can actually be excited about, be a part of making successful. And where that happens, the change success, it tilts the opposite direction, right? You see the change being successful. And it's not surprising. 2 years ago when we were here, and Gene worked with me to do the experiment with all the speakers, to have them do the survey, just to see. Our hypothesis was, because they have already demonstrated success in leading their organizations and getting this kind of buy-in, we suspect that they might actually be high in these competencies. And we ran the survey, and not surprisingly, they were, this group of people here is off the charts in terms of leading with these behaviors. So we thought that was pretty special, and I think that's why that wound up being added to the 2017 State of DevOps survey, and Nicole's been continuing that research, and you saw it show up in Accelerate.
Yeah.
So it seems like, I've for every successful DevOps transformation out there, there's at least 5 or 10 that have not been so successful. So, and from what I gather, a lot of that has to do with the culture and the fact that they just couldn't get it together to transform the company, and then taking that from that top down. So, what is it about those DevOps organizations that have done it right? What is it about the way the leadership is approaching DevOps? Is it just they see the value, or is it and because of that they're able to effectively communicate that to their employees, or is it more of a kind of that can-do spirit, if you will, trying something new to see how they can improve the organization?
I think they're more willing to give it a fair chance and not immediately go back to the old instruments. It's an understanding that failure actually is a stepping stone on the way to the success, rather than thinking, oh no, we failed, we have to take back or go back to the tools that we used before. It's not really an alternative, because in a lot of companies we see that things aren't going very well, and the tools of the old age, they don't work anymore.
That's right.
It's a little bit moving or going back to a little bit of certainty. At least people knew that it didn't go, and they knew what to expect. And so I think the difference is that an open mindset is probably the best thing to describe that. More open mindset.
Right.
Would you agree?
Yeah, and you touched on something that excuse me, that ability to have a safe space to learn a new way, and not feel like if I don't get it just right, then here comes the hammer, right? And I've literally seen CEOs stand up in front of the organization and say, this is the most important thing that you need to do for us as the organization. And I understand that you may have a dip in performance or delivery, and you may have a customer that's not happy, and here's my cell phone, here's my home phone, right? If that happens, you call me. I'll go talk to the customer, right? You don't worry about that. I'll take that heat. I want you focused on what is this new way of working, because this is our future. Now think about that. If you're in that kind of organization, and that leader just created that safe space for you to learn, that reduces the fear, and that reduces the, hey, maybe I can lean out a little bit. Maybe I can try something new. And maybe they are going to support me, right? And I'm not sticking my neck out. It seems so subtle, but it really is the difference. And I've gone from organization to organization to organization, and see, why does this one seem to be going so well, and this one is having all these problems? When you get behind the curtain and talk to people and hear what they're saying, it's those kinds of elements. And that's why I've been on this quest to get the message out to leaders. Is like, you got to think about how you're leading. Just telling people to do something that's this significant in terms of changing the culture that's not going to give you the results you're expecting.
No, but it's one thing to have the conversation, to say this is really what you need to do to drive DevOps in your organization, and it's quite another for them to actually internalize that, and just they're not going to change their way of thinking and their practices on a dime. So how do you get them to kind of turn the ship midstream, if you will?
Well, I'd like to say something. Well, I just witnessed your presentation, and I think the why is very important there. If we fail to communicate the why, people won't change their behavior. it has to be clear, and they have to understand. People have to understand what's in it for them.
That's right.
It's a basic feeling, I think. We have to understand how it can help us before we are willing to change our behavior. And if we fail to bring that kind of a message across, we can't expect anything to be done differently the next day.
Absolutely, and I think another part of that is it's the why, but then it's also engaging people in the conversation and actually bringing them into it and listening, not having a leader posture that says we have all the answers. I mean, so much of I've been in this business 30 years, and the leadership culture, what we teach managers and executives is, you have to be that it's like great man theory, right? The person at the top that has all the answers and can't show any weakness, right? Because that's what gives people confidence.
Right.
But what we really know and understand about today's workforce is, like in the exercise, a little vulnerability goes a long way, because that makes you a real person, and that authenticity creates trust, and trust is absolutely essential to get people to step out, try something new, right? And another part of creating that trust is saying, what do you think about this? Right? This is what we're seeing. These are the challenges we're facing. We're listening to what's going on in the industry, and we're seeing other organizations like ours adopt these things. We believe this is the right path, but we don't do your work. We're not in where the products are being built. So creating those venues where they have a legitimate voice back into the process, and we listen and we respect. It's not surface, right? People will sense that fast, right? Oh, they're just doing that to make it look like, they want us to be involved so they can check that box.
Right.
They know that people know the difference. But when you really authentically, wow, that's, we didn't think about that. So, we've got a planning meeting next week. Would you mind participating? And let's hear more about that, because that seems like if we miss that, then we're going to have see, that's the kind of conversation, and that open, hey, we're all in this together, and yes, I may have a different job or a different title, but that doesn't make my ideas any better than your ideas, and clearly yours are valuable. Again, that gets people. Engagement surveys, we've all done engagement surveys. The academic term underneath that is called organizational citizenship behavior. It's that element that causes someone to contribute above and beyond their job description to the success of the organization. And that's really what we're trying to tap into, because that's what it's going to take. But people aren't going to give that if they don't feel like it's safe.
So one of the things that, I've heard, and I've actually experienced myself, is the fact that, there are so many things that can be done to improve the organization, but time can be so problematic sometimes. We have so many responsibilities that we have to do, and making time to undergo something like this, you kind of have to pick and choose what your priorities are going to be. So how do you kind of balance that out?
It's a struggle. I see that in a lot of companies, the company that I work in and the companies that I know people are working in around me in New Zealand. I think it's very hard to get the prioritization right. Too often we think that improvement is something that people have to do on the sides. But it is true that we can only make big steps forward when we think of improvement as the most important thing that we have to do.
Right.
If making progress is the one and only thing that we focus on, and then we look at the other work that we have to do, I think that's when we make a lot of progress. But it is a hard story to bring, because it's something that is going against a lot of the ideas that a lot of people have been working with in the last 30 years, especially in IT. the ideas aren't new because, well, we all know lean management, and this is a given in a lean environment, that improvement is more important. Improvement of the work is more important than the work. But I think that, yeah, again, if you can focus on the improvements, that is where the key to the success is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Another element is, and I agree with all of that, and being grounded in the values and principles of lean that's now got 80 decades of evidence, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to argue against that. But even in the implementation, we can help ourselves by learning from some of the other parts of lean, which is small batches, right? And so when I'm working with an organization and we do some problem solving, root cause analysis, improvement kind of work, I then work to get them to think about, okay, what is a small batch of that improvement that we can move out on immediately, get some fast results, and then evaluate that to see, do we need to keep going down that path? Are we doing the right improvement? And there's also this reinforcement of they got something done and they got some immediate tangible feedback, whether it was positive or negative, right? Whether that, hey, let's keep doing that, or no, that wasn't a great idea. At least we didn't waste a bunch more time pursuing something that wasn't going to work. Okay, hey, we pivoted and now we're doing, hey, there's some reinforcement, but it requires having those small batches, because if we do this monstrous improvement initiative that takes months and months, and it's very complex and very anti-lean, then people kind of get lost in I don't know if that ever went anywhere, and the motivation goes down.
Yeah, we've all seen that happen a million times before.
So small batches.
There was an interesting aspect to that in Mark Schwartz's talk yesterday, when he talked about the funding of initiatives, where he also said, let's look at it very short term and ask people based on 2 weeks of work whether they still want to invest in something, yes or no. I don't think a lot of companies are set up for that, but it is definitely a way to, like you say, see immediate proof of whether it's a success or a failure.
Right.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes total sense. And we could talk about this all afternoon. I know we could, but unfortunately we don't have all afternoon. So Christophe and Steve, thank you so much for taking the time and talking with me about this. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you.